Good morning. My name is Heather Leonard Sullivan, and I'll be interviewing Ulana Fuller. This is part of an oral history project at the Ontario County Historical Society, along with the help of Wood Library. Today is March the 3rd, 2022. Good morning, Ulana.
Hi, Heather.
Okay, so we're here today on this oral history project, and the topic that we've agreed to cover is your life here in Canandaigua. So do you want to tell us your name and kind of how long you've lived here?
Yep.
Started?
My name is Ulana Fuller, and I've lived here for 43 years. My family moved from Rochester to Canandaigua in 1979.
Okay. And how about we go with what is your earliest memory of living in Canandaigua?
Yeah, so my earliest memory actually was having, well, I don't know if it was lunch or dinner, when we moved into our cottage. So we lived in an old cottage on the lake. It was known as the Old Connor Place, and it was an original cottage. Very interesting. I mean, it wasn't meant for year-round living, and my family lived in it year-round. And I remember moving there, sitting with my parents and my sister and my uncle at the, yellow formica table, eating kubasa, because my family is Ukrainian. And it was raining outside, and this was this new house right on the lake.
Okay. Now, as a child on the lake, because you said you were in a three-season house, was the community three-season, or was there a tight-knit year-round community?
No.
Kind of how would you describe it?
No, so we lived south of German Brothers, and there were 5 houses right in a row, right on the lakeside. And we were the only ones who stayed year-round of those 5 houses. So, we knew our neighbors well. It was like having a bunch of extra grandparents, and a couple houses down, the neighbors' grandchildren would come in the summer. We could play with them. So we were involved, running over to borrow eggs or calling. They were, our neighbors were knitting crocheting blankets for my sister and I, and making sweaters for us. So we were close, but once winter came, we were the only ones there. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That must have been really kind of exciting and
It was
interesting.
well, as my sister and I got older, it was a lot of fun because we kind of had the run of the place. So
Okay. All right. So, can you tell me a little bit about kind of growing up and what the ecology was like? I'm sure you noticed, especially if you're on your own, plants and animals and changes and things like that.
yeah, there definitely. There've been. It just changes. I don't know if they're good or bad. We fished all the time, every day. We were fishing in the summer, catch and release, or fishing for trout for dinner. I do remember that there were a lot of very large sunfish, and I don't see that anymore at my parents' house. I just remember, they were like almost dinner plate size. They were huge, a lot more bullheads. We used to see mud puppies frequently, which is kind of like a salamander in the lake. It looks like a salamander. It's about 8 inches long maybe, and they are nocturnal, so you don't see them during the day. They just crawl along the bottom, and they have these kind of red gills that are outside of their body. Really interesting, prehistoric looking creatures. I haven't seen one of those in years, but we do see mink now, and we occasionally see beavers and otters swimming by my parents' house, which is pretty interesting. There are bald eagles now that we didn't have when I was growing up. So it's changed. And of course we have the zebra mussels. So that has really changed the experience of swimming in the lake for from my generation to my kids' generation. My kids have grown up with water shoes, and I never had water shoes.
I was going to say, I don't know about zebra mussels, so can you tell
So
me
the
about...
zebra mussels are an invasive species, and they have very sharp edges to their shells. So, and they just will grow kind of like in these colonies on rocks, on posts, you know, anything that's in the water that they can adhere to. So a sandy bottom, yeah, you can still walk on that, but if you have a rocky bottom, like at my parents' house, you can't walk on it. You will cut your feet up. You'll just slice them up.
Wow.
So
okay.
yeah,
So that's quite a big change.
it
then.
is a big change. Yeah.
Yeah, circling back to growing up on the lake, you mentioned that you would be out at night and you would see these creatures.
Yeah, we did a lot of, well, we would catch bait at night. So, so my dad, so we had two docks. We had a wooden dock that came out for the winter, and we had a concrete dock that was basically an extension of the break wall. And so sometimes if my dad felt like it, he would string a long net in between the two docks, and we'd put a lantern in the corner of the break wall and the concrete dock. And we'd leave that lantern there, and a couple hours later, we would start drawing in the net, because either the sawbellies was what we were catching, and this was bait for trout. So the sawbellies would be attracted to the light from the lantern, and we would go and we would bring in the two sides of the net and just kind of enclose that area, and then we used our smelting nets, which is a long net with kind of a basketball hoop shaped net on the end, and we'd scoop those up into our bucket, and then we had our bait for the next few days.
Okay, and would you say is that a fishing, I don't know much about fishing, is that a fishing thing? Is that a fishing on Canandaigua Lake thing?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's just how I grew up.
All right,
We never fished with lures.
Okay.
We always used live bait.
And do you know if other people fish the same way, or was this a fuller
I know.
only technique?
Oh no, it wasn't a fuller only. I don't know if, I don't know if other people caught their own bait, but you could go to the bait shop and you could get smelt or sawbellies for live bait. So that was a common method.
Okay, so
Yes.
somebody else was doing it.
Of course.
Perhaps in the
Yeah.
same fashion.
I'm sure.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. I didn't know so much about fishing.
Yeah.
But, thank you for that. Anything else about the ecology? So you mentioned that now it sounds like there's maybe perhaps more predatory animals, so eagles, beavers, that might be...
Yeah, you know, the mink,
Okay.
they get into your bait tank, and
Do
that's
they?
frustrating. They don't. I remember one year we had a mink running around at my parents' house, and my dad was so angry at this creature because it was just killing the bait and piling them up behind our bait tank and wasn't even eating them. And so we were just really frustrated because, you know, if it ate it, at least it would have made it a little better.
More after the glory then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now how about, so growing up we've talked about the lake itself, and then how about Lake Shore Drive?
Yeah, so
talk a little bit about
Lakeshore
that.
Drive was a lot different. First of all, we had Roseland Park, the amusement park. So that was fun. And then basically you had the road, there was no curb, there was no median. I just remember as kind of an old, I don't know if it was potted or not, but the sand or dirt came right up to the edge of the road, and there was a chain link fence separating the park from the road. And that was it. It was just very basic. There were at least three swimming areas. Over close to where the sailboarding shop is, where they launch their kayaks, there was a kiddie beach, and that was kind of sweet and quiet. So where families would go, mothers with their young children in the mornings, and then farther down to the east along Lakeshore Drive were two other beaches, and there was beach volleyball area, and that was where you'd see just more the crowds and multi-ages and adults hanging out. So there was also a swimming lesson dock next to the marina and sailboard shop, and my sister and I did all of our swimming lessons there, all while we were growing up. So we would go in the morning, and it didn't matter what the weather was. We had our swimming lessons, so some days it was hard to get in the water if it was cold and wavy and windy, but it was special. You know, it was just special. I never did swimming lessons in the pool. So it was always at the lake. We did our life saving at the lake. Eventually we did our lifeguarding at Kershaw. It was great.
Okay, and do those, so you said there was a kiddie beach, and then there was another beach, and there was the volleyball, and then there were the swimming lessons. Do those exist today?
No, there's just one swimming beach now.
Okay.
But what wasn't happening back then, that is happening now, is the people who like to do open water swimming, and they go out and swim the buoys, and there is support from, I guess, the city to do that we are allowed to go out there and do that. And even the lifeguards at Kershaw let us go in if we want to start from their beach, and we just tell them we're going to swim the buoys, and they don't holler at us to stay inside the swimming areas. They know that we're going to go swim the buoys and do the mile open water.
I see, so actually the permissioning has expanded
Yeah,
over time.
yeah.
So you
And
wouldn't
the
have-
interest has expanded
Okay.
with the onset of the triathlons, local triathlons, so that interest has just grown
Okay.
hugely over the years.
Interesting,
Mhm.
interesting. Okay, so you mentioned the Kershaw Park, and that's where you did your lifeguarding course. And does that still exist as it did, or has that changed also?
The lifeguarding course?
Yeah.
No, there are no lifeguarding courses on the
Okay.
lake there that I know of,
Okay.
which is unfortunate, because they taught lifeguarding, and that, I think, guaranteed them lifeguards for each progressive season. So,
Right.
now there's not that. I think the pandemic has made things harder because there were no lifeguarding classes last year.
Okay.
And there are other opportunities with less responsibility for young people.
Okay. So is that considered, when you were growing up, sort of a rite of passage living on the lake? Did a lot of young people do it?
A lot of people did, but it tended to be more, and probably still how it is, a lot of people who were involved in competitive swimming did it. And of course, not everyone. There were some lifeguards weren't involved in competitive swimming, but they were strong enough swimmers. So, but my circle was involved in lifeguarding.
Okay.
I didn't lifeguard at Kershaw Park though.
Okay. And how about your children? Did they do the lifeguarding?
They always grew up in the water, and they grew up kayaking and paddleboarding and skiing a little bit. They did not do lifeguarding, although one did become a lifeguard in college. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of a family
Yeah.
tradition.
Yeah.
How about if we take a moment to switch over into the city part of
Mhm.
Canandaigua? So we'll leave, although it's on the southern border of the city, correct? And we'll move back more toward Main Street. Do you want to talk about kind of the Main Street that you knew growing up, and maybe some observable changes over time on the city part
Yeah,
of Canandaigua?
so we didn't have our beautiful flower beds when I was growing up. And we didn't have all those crosswalks. We had crosswalks, but not with the lights. So there was probably less pedestrian traffic crossing randomly across Main Street, which made it a little easier. And of course, there was less traffic. It was a bit quieter. But as far as concerts at CMAC, which back then we called the Shell, We always had that concert traffic on concerts night that would be backed up, all the way up 332. So that hasn't changed. There were different shops, of course. I think there's a lot more restaurants now and a little bit higher end restaurants. But, we had a Drew's stationery store was a big storefront that had been there for a long time. There used to be a J.C. Penney catalog store where the Salvation Army building is. So it was different, but some of these stores have been there all through. Davidson's, the Goody Two Shop, so it hasn't changed.
Okay. So you mentioned there wasn't as much pedestrian traffic. So do you feel like over time there are more pedestrians?
I think so, and I think it's a good thing. It's nice to see life on the streets, on the sidewalks. There's a lot of people walking around, and it's great.
Okay. And then in terms of the shops themselves, in terms of browsing, would you say there are more or less, so like as opposed to like an accountant or a lawyer's office where they come and hang a shingle out, but there's no real foot traffic in the sense that you can kind of browse and walk by, would you say the mix has changed more or less in that direction?
I can't say, I don't remember. Probably though, I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. But definitely more flowers and more interest by the city part.
Yeah, there's a kind of move to gentrify.
Okay.
Main Street.
Sure.
Which I think is common generally everywhere.
Okay. Do you know about, so there's the little green, so back from Main Street, there's a little green as you go towards the gardens there. And there's a little box that people can put books into. Did you know that that's there?
There's a couple spots.
Oh, okay.
By the YMCA?
No, so this one's on the other side on the green between Main Street and then the Sonanout Gardens. There's a little
There's a lot of these little boxes everywhere. This movement, these little library boxes, take a book, leave a book type thing. So there's several around town.
Okay. And they do seem like they have books in them. Have you ever used one?
I haven't. I know people who have.
Okay.
But yeah.
It just kind of caught my interest. I was walking over today and I was like, oh, that's definitely a city thing I don't know about. Okay. And then how about the town? So the town itself, because I live in the town, it definitely seems like there's all sorts of neighborhoods and mixes of neighborhoods, and definitely people that seem like they've been there for a really long time. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So I grew up in the town.
Okay.
Where we lived was in the town of Canandaigua, and it has changed a lot. I have mixed feelings about it. All the places I used to hike, I can't hike in anymore. There's 3 different housing developments on the kind of big tract of land that I used to hike on between Whitefills Road and Foster Road and Westlake Road and Middle Cheshire Road. So there's been a lot of development, but I can't say that's a bad thing because people have their dreams and want to live in a nice place. So I would want to, do that too if I could. It's an easy commute if you live in Rochester, but then again, I think, it's changed so much. I just can't hike. I wouldn't even know how to get to some of the places where I used to collect fossils, and go to old junk piles and collect old bottles and things like I used to do growing up. So that's a little bit different. Whitefills Road hardly had any houses on it when I was growing up. Foster Road didn't have many houses. Even Middle Cheshire Road didn't. So it's just very different. And along the lake, a lot of the old cottages have been torn down and large houses have been built. So it's different.
Okay. And then on the flip side of that, have you found new trails or have other trails opened up?
There are. The town has worked really hard to preserve land and open spaces, through the Finger Lakes Land Trust and things like that. So there are some additional parks that have been developed. Even Ononda Park, I think I was in high school when that became a town park. It used to be a private camp. So, that's available to the public, and that's a great thing because it's just a great access to the lake farther down,
Okay.
where it's a little quieter, and there are hiking trails up there. So, yeah.
So would you say that it's gone from, it sounds like what you did was less formal, kind of like maybe there was a beaten path, but you certainly could go off on your own, as opposed to like, I use Ontario Pathways, which is definitely something that's been designed.
I was just exploring any deer trail that I could find and seeing where it took me, so I was crawling through the brush and, along the rims of the gorges, and it was great. And it was very informal. And I just kind of went where I wanted and, thought, oh, I wonder where this goes. And that was a great way to grow up.
Okay. Well, at least you had a way to get back, right? You followed your own footsteps.
Well, you could always head towards the lake and walk home on Westlake Road.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's not easy to get lost around here.
Okay, fair enough. You always have that one navigation point, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're sort of getting to the end. Is there anything you'd like to see for the future? Is there?
Yeah, I'd like to see Canandaigua become a more biker-friendly city. I think that it would be great. I like to bike to places, but a lot of times I don't feel safe on the roads. There's just such an increase in traffic. The speeds have increased. People don't stop at the red lights, and they're not really watching. And of course, there's a distraction of cell phones with drivers. So we have a bike lane on Main Street now, but it's narrow, and if there's cars parked on Main Street or trucks on Main Street, it makes it really hard. But there's also a lot of people walking on the sidewalks. So, it's hard to bike on the sidewalk, and you're not really supposed to unless you're a child. Of course, no one expects the kids to be on the street. But if we could become more biker friendly, I think that would just be a really great development for Canandaigua.
Okay. And how about the one challenge with biking is where to chain the bike. I know the library has a bike rack, but there are actually not very many on Main Street.
No, there aren't, and even at the grocery stores, I usually have to chain my bike to the cart return. So that's or at church. My family has liked to bike to church in the past, but then it's where do we lock our bikes up to?
Right.
Sometimes it's just locking them all together.
I
So.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it can be a challenge. And then do you bike on the county roads where the speed limits are higher, or do you tend to avoid those places?
I do, but if I bike, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer, and I bike before the traffic is out.
Okay.
And that's the only time I'll bike.
Okay. Okay. So it's not, at that point, it's no longer.
I want to be off the road by 6:30 at the latest.
So it's not a commuter option if you're not using it to get from point A to point B anymore because of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And it's too hot. It's too hot later in the day.
This is true.
Yeah.
The pavement does warm up. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today and participation in this project. And this is going to be Heather Leonard Sullivan signing off.